Hi, United in Recovery family. I'm glad to see you tonight. It's so important that we engage together right now in uh, the work of recovery because there's so much in our lives, in our society, pulling us apart. And we know that the recovery community and its health is vital to each of our recoveries. We're all dependent on this community, which gives us strength in our recovery. So thank you for joining us this evening. If you were with us last week, you heard Matt Kittrell, and Matt talked about how we can live out lives of truth in a world of conspiracy theories and how we can find truths of God's real promises that we can really stand on, not just promises other people tell us to persuade us to do what they want us to do. And this week, we want to build on that and say, how can we overcome paranoia? How can we overcome in our lives this unrealistic worry and dread and fear, which sometimes can steal our joy and sometimes can actually lead us back into relapse and into compulsive behaviors that which we don't want any part of. So right now, there's a lot of paranoia in our community, in our society, in our world that comes from a lot of the things we talked about last time, that we think these people are out to get us. And we need to be aware as people in recovery that we are particularly vulnerable to paranoia. You might remember that if you were in the throes of addiction or compulsive behavior, that there was probably a time where you experienced paranoia because you knew you didn't have your act together. And you knew there were probably people who, if they found out what was going on in your life, they were going to come and do things that you didn't want done. And so you lived in this constant dread and constant fear. And then you get that dread and fear and you have to self-medicate to help yourself through it. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. I remember talking to one friend and she shared that I think she was 5 or 6 years sober before she realized she didn't have to be terrified anymore every time she passed a cop car as she was driving. Because you know what? Her tags weren't out of date anymore and her license wasn't expired. And she didn't have outstanding debts or warrants. She realized, hey, I don't have to fear anymore. And it's important that we go through life right now in these days without that fear because paranoia can sneak back up on us. We can think, well, now that I've kind of got my act together, there are these big, powerful, invisible forces out there and they're out to get me. All right. Or we can become kind of self-righteous and we can say, well, it's everybody else's problem. And if these people would clean up their act, then I could be happy. And how could I be happy when these people haven't cleaned up their act yet, when they're doing this, when this is going on in our society? How can I ever be at peace? We can let that slip in, and that doesn't sound real sober, does it? That sounds a lot like the way we think when we're drinking and drugging. And if you're still drinking and drugging, one, I hope you'll come to a Zoom group tonight because that's one of the first steps out, one of our open share groups. But also, you need to know that when you put substances in your body that your body wasn't designed for, those substances literally affect your brain in such a way that it makes you more prone to paranoia. So with all that's going on, much of it that we hear about on social media and other places is stuff that's made up to cause fear in us. And I have to say, it breaks my heart because I see people from within the recovery community, people I know dearly, I love dearly, I think highly of. I see them caught up and spreading and spewing some of this stuff. And I want to say, if you're doing that, don't. If there's a way you can stand up for truth and help others in your local community, do that. But it's not going to make you any more sober, and it's not going to help anybody else to just spew that on social media. But there may also be things that are legitimate worries, right? Where you're like, well, this could happen and it would have this effect. I mean, we're going through a pandemic. COVID's a legit worry. There are other things that are, economic factors right now that could be legitimate worries. Well, how do we live our lives with that and not let it become paranoia, not let it steal our joy, not let it steal our sobriety? I want to share with you this promise from Isaiah, the 43rd verse. And if you still feel paranoia starting to steal your joy, I want you to turn to Isaiah 43 and I want you to read this, beginning with the first verse. But now thus says the Lord, he who created you, O Jacob, he who formed you, O Israel, do not fear, for I have redeemed you.
I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. You are precious in my sight and honored, and I love you. I give people in return for you, nations in exchange for your life. Do not fear. I am with you. I will bring your offspring up from the east and from the west. I will gather you. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not withhold. Bring my sons from far away and my daughters from the end of the earth. Everyone who is called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made. Hey, let me just read one more line of that again. Do not fear, for I am with you. That's a promise we can rely on right now. That's something our world needs to know. You know, in a lot of ways, when I look at the news and when I look at my social media feed, what I think the world needs right now is for everybody to have to come and sit down in a recovery group of some sort or another. I think we have a tremendous gift to share. And part of that comes from the fact that we know how much we need one another in recovery. Because, you know, addiction and compulsive behavior doesn't matter what your political opinions are. Addiction and compulsive behavior doesn't take note of your skin color before it invites itself to ruin your life. Addiction and compulsive behavior doesn't care if you're a citizen or an immigrant or where your citizenship is. It doesn't care about any of that. It just invites itself in. And then you end up in one of these rooms and you're with people who are different than you, who you need to stay alive, and they need you to stay alive. And the fact of the matter is that's not just recovery, that's life in general. That's how God made us. You remember the very beginning of the Bible? When God's talking to Adam, he says, it's not good that man be alone. So he creates Eve, creates a partner. We need in this life the people God places in it. And God creates those people different than us because we don't just need what we have to offer. We need what they have to offer, what God has to bless us through them also. So I would encourage you right now, as you prepare to join us in an open share group, which you can find those Zoom links on our Facebook page and at United in Recovery, and you can find them in our United in Recovery emails. Or excuse me, if you're not on either of those platforms, go to concordunited.org/recovery. You'll find the links there as well. You can join us for an open share group. And while there, I want you to share tonight, what is it that you find yourself worrying about that you can't do anything about? And what is it that you need to give up? And where is it that you need to seek community that's life-giving? So let's discuss those things tonight as you go to your open share groups, and let's give thanks that God has given us this community. Remember the serenity prayer? God, help me accept the things I cannot change. That's my prayer for you tonight. God bless you. I hope to see you soon.